Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 182 for Monday, February 28th, 2022, the last of February. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Jonny, but you may know him better as the Elevated Pixel Riffs. Hello, sir.
Hello, and if you want to elevate your Spawn Chunks experience, you can get the extended conversation by visiting patreon.com/thespawnchunks and listen to The Render Distance, where Joel and I have been talking about Vikings Valhalla on Netflix, the anticipation for the Lord of the Rings show on Amazon Prime, and a variety of other things that we've been doing with our morning here on this lovely Monday, or very cold Monday if you are Joel. Aside from that, it's been a great week to be a patron of the Spawn Chunks, because patrons not only got an extended episode with Sliced Lime last week, but we had a great time at our first Minecraft Hangout this weekend, where some folks from our Discord were sharing screenshots of what they've been doing in Minecraft. We chatted about what to build in the Badlands, why people don't use coral more, the many uses of map art, and lots of other stuff. If you're a patron, you can get the download of that in your patrons-only RSS feed, and you can follow along with the Hangout chat, which is still archived in our Discord. Other things patrons get include a bit of priority in the Chunk Mail Dispenser episodes if you write into the show and get your email read. We also have a quarterly hangout where we go over facts and figures and the behind the scenes of making the show, and hopefully lots of monthly Minecraft hangouts to come. So there's a lot on the slate for patrons in 2022.
And thanks everyone for the support. It's great to hit this milestone. And that was super fun. I had a blast. It's so nice to have the time to sit down and see and talk in real time with people about their screenshots. Like, it's cool that we have that room in our Discord that people post screenshots and talk about them, but it can feel like a bulletin board sometimes because not everybody's around at the same time. But when you're in that live conversation talking about builds, like, as people are there, if you have a question, they're going to answer right away. So that was really cool.
Yeah, and it's I want to contribute to the screenshot chat basically all the time to chip in about like what I like about some people's stuff, but I don't always have the time during my day, so nice to set aside a little bit of time for that. Speaking of which, we're going to chat a bit about what's new in our Minecraft lives, and why don't you kick us off, Joel?
So, to get this out of the way, I played all of Fabric 5 a little bit, I moved to Tree Farm, and that's all I did. I'm kind of hitting a wall in that playthrough, where I think the next move is going to be a vanilla move / modded move where I have to get myself ready to go fight the dragon, because Better End is one of the mods in the pack, and that will be a very unique and new experience, but I am not ready at the moment. So what I decided to do was just move the tree farm so that my complex looks better, and so things are still happening, but it's out of the way, made it a little bit more automated, but nothing too crazy.
When you get to the Better End stuff, it'd be really interesting to hear more about that on the show, considering that the end dimension is one of the things that the community is eyeing up and saying, hey, Mojang needs to add some stuff here, and it'd be interesting to kind of contrast what you might expect from an end update with what people have delivered in modded. So yeah, excited to hear you get to that point.
Me too. The real fun this week was on the Citadel. I had this block where I didn't know what to do next in the west part of town, and so the solution was don't do anything at all. I ended up spending some time shaping some rivers, which led to actually being inspired to create a stone bridge across one of the south rivers into the town. And this is going to help with the south gate feeling less of a just plunked on the landscape, and have like a little fishing village that doesn't exist within the town walls, but is, you know, people are living near the town in case bad things happen, so they can kind of like go inside. So it's very rough right now. There's a couple of stone foundations laid out, you know, diorite and stone, as I've often done before. But the stone bridge was something that was really fun. And in particular, I built it off of a website image from tabletopworld.com, and they have like models for miniatures, like for D&D displays, or just you just want to make a model as a hobby. And so it's not a Minecraft model, and it's not a Lego model. It's something that you very traditionally have to translate from its existence into Minecraft, but it is 3D, so you can get multiple views of this model, especially from like a shop on the website where if you're purchasing it, you want to see what it looks like from multiple angles. And this bridge is got some asymmetrical things to it. It's got two little guard huts on one end, but then the other side, there's only one building, and it's a much larger building. And so the way that I've done that is I've had the top floor of the building comes out onto the deck of the bridge, but then the bottom floor exits onto the river, which is, of course, 5 or 6 blocks below the bridge. I've not finished all the texturing on the bridge and the approach, but I have finished the 2 guard huts, and I finished the main house that's on the bridge. And I'm not even sure if it's something that someone would live in, more like someone that would just like stay there and like watch over the bridge or something. And it was a lot of fun. A lot of problem solving. I'm trying to make this area look older and poorer, or not built of the same materials inside the town. So there's just going to be a lot of wood, a lot of stone. I'm going to try to do more wood walls so it looks more like shacks than it does like real sturdy things. The bridge, of course, had to look sturdy, but I'm happy with the way that it came out. I had to make some adjustments to the roof. It was very ugly. And it turned out that even though it's a small build, adding a little bit of depth, like in like a 5x5 square house, sometimes just taking the corners off, so one of your walls is 3 blocks wide, it gives it just that little bit of a dormer feel, or of a protruding wall, and it's just the amount of detail that you need to make it look less ugly. Because that was my problem, was like, I don't know how to describe what's wrong with it other than like, I don't like it. I want to change it, and it's hard on that scale.
Yeah, no, I get into that rut every time of like, I'm not entirely certain what I want to change about this, but there's still something missing slightly. I love the Tabletop World site, though. That seems like a really fun resource, and while it's got like, a range of models, some of which are grayscale, so you're not seeing like in full color, you can kind of, you can figure out from the models they've got there what's what. And I like that as a way of being able to search for more designs like that without stuff like, concept art from ArtStation or just a Google image search that's probably going to fill itself with stuff from Minecraft if your search history is anything like mine. Because I was doing a bit of building it in the survival guide this week. I was looking for a crane to build in this dripstone cave mine that I've decided is going to be more of like a fantasy steampunk dwarven kind of style build where everything's sort of propped up and beamed, and there's going to be lights strung up along the roof and lanterns, and like there's a crane that is helping lift cargo from a lower cave floor up to the elevated platforms that are the entrance to this whole thing. And I came across a bunch of crane designs just by searching for it, and so many of them were things that people had already built in Minecraft, and they're just Minecraft builds in my search history. And then I found one that was from, I think, Anno 1800, which is another video game I'm not that familiar with, but
I'm familiar.
Yeah, like has lots of, seems like a strategy game kind of thing, or like a sort of world building game. So there's a lot of like what I would describe as units or things that you'd build in, say, like a Warcraft style game, like a top-down RTS kind of situation. And there was a crane there that fit perfectly what I wanted. So I'm more or less building that, or a kind of Minecraft facsimile of that as I go. And that's working really well. But finding stuff that wasn't already like either something that I'd seen when I'd idly Googled this before, or somebody else's Minecraft build that I didn't want to end up copying too much from was actually a surprisingly difficult task.
It's funny, like I have that issue as well. And to go down the model route, I find that Pinterest will give you more 3D models.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, if you're on ArtStation, obviously you're going to get more flat artwork and stuff like that. But Anno would be a really good inspiration for Minecraft as well, because as far as I know, it's like a city builder. So think like city skylines, but like 1800s.
Right. Okay. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah. But so there's lots of resources. And they'd have to have like lots of variations so that everything you build doesn't look exactly the same,
Yeah.
And so I imagine any kind of like concept art or models from Anno would be excellent reference for Minecraft.
Yeah.
I was watching your I haven't seen the crane. I don't know if I got to the end of the episode, but I was watching your latest episode on the Survival Guide Season 2, and the bubble columns and the ladders and stuff was super cool.
Yeah. I think they kind of fit with, I was going fairly basic with player elevators, and I wanted to fit scaffolding and ladders in there somewhere, because those felt like the kind of things that, while they're very basic for the player and we're used to things that are faster and, you fall into a block of water instead of having to slowly make your way down through scaffolding, it made sense to have them there as part of the world for miners to be able to kind of climb up there manually instead of the only water elevator I have goes up to the boss's office, basically, because he's the one who's got like the fancy equipment, more or less. So yeah, I was working with water elevators a little bit and managed to fit in my opinions about magma block bubble columns, which is that they're not good for player transport because you can just fall and it's faster. So yeah, I've been working on a little bit of that. Added in a slime block bounce pad as well, which are still one of my favorite things to build just because I forget about the use of slime blocks for player movement, because honestly they're not all that reliable, I think, and I don't know if that's changed. So I'm interested in experimenting with that a bit more and seeing if it's become a little bit more reliable, or if it still has the issue where occasionally you'll clip into the block in a weird way and you'll find yourself inside the thing suffocating in a slime block, which has happened to me on a number of previous occasions.
I like the idea of using slime blocks to like launch yourself across, like what normally you would bridge across, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or too far to jump, inconvenient to fly because it's too short. But having a slime block landing pad and a slime block launcher, I think is a fun way to try and get around. It depends on your build, of course. Like it has to suit what you're doing, but I've always liked that. I agree with you. I'm glad you brought up the magma block elevator, because whenever I saw that happening in Let's Plays, I always just kind of groaned in my head, like, why?
Yeah.
Like, it's weird. Like, I'm not even playing and I'm annoyed that it's taking you so long to go down this elevator.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, it's cool if you build a block swapper at the bottom of it so you can pull a lever and then it becomes a soul sand bubble column compared to a magma, and vice versa, right? You can have it just kind of shuttle a block back and forth depending on whether you want to go up or down, and then you're only using one water column, which is great. But yeah, the rest of the time, I just find them just, I don't know, unnecessarily irritating. You always take damage at the bottom of them as well, and they're slow, and I just don't bother with them all that much. I've used them for item transport once or twice, because then you can have a water flow at the bottom of the column that's going to propel the items outwards. But
yeah,
even that isn't as reliable as a mechanic as it sounds like it should be.
No.
So I haven't really messed around with them too much. I did die for the first time in Survival Guide this week as which was weird, but it didn't happen on camera, and so I just kind of went, oh, well, I guess that happened. I just went back and got my stuff. A creeper blew me up at the entrance to this base I've been working on, because caves are still the boss of 118, and it turns out there are a lot of dark areas in this wide-open dripstone cave I've been building in, some of which were directly above my head. It was one of those things where I was just in my inventory crafting buttons to put on this crane, and I just decided, let me craft some warped buttons, and then a couple of seconds later, boom, just out of nowhere. And I think I was wearing a gold helmet and elytra at the time, so I didn't even have like a full set of armor, but it just took me by surprise and blew up at point blank, and there wasn't really a whole lot I could do. So I gave that a brief nod in the episode, but I couldn't really immediately do a whole episode about like, well, here's what to do when you die, chaps, because the whole thing just happened off camera.
That's got to be I guess a risk when you're doing the tutorial series, and then something that you really want to include in the tutorial happens when you're doing like the behind the scenes play, or I guess it would be like second best if it happened on stream versus, being able to record it for a Let's Play video. But just to have it happen on your own, you're like, darn it. It would have been nice to actually talk about this.
Yeah, I'm cheating myself out of content at the end of the day, but it's also, I think people, especially in more recent Minecraft community stuff, people have applied a lot more meaning to death now. I think it's probably because of the rise of hardcore as one of the things people tend to expect from Minecraft Let's Plays now, is that like it's a big momentous thing when you die and people are like, oh no, and I find that it doesn't really bother me. Like, as long as I can go back and get my stuff, like, I don't really care. And the fact that it was an anticlimax in terms of, like, what I could do with it in the video almost worked better for my point of view about death in Minecraft. And considering that I've just spent the entirety of Empire's SMP, like, trying to get some element of that hardcore experience into what was just a regular survival server by marking everybody's deaths by putting candles out and stuff like that, and applying some layer of meaning to when people died on this server, I kind of find it funny to now be taking the opposite perspective and kind of going, it doesn't matter. Like, just went back and got my stuff again. It was fine. I lost a few XP levels. I can get them back at whatever farm that I happen to have going at the time. So yeah, really strange experience to have not really been bothered by it, but I'm fine with it personally. I now, speaking of creepers, I'm getting my revenge because I have a mob farm now. I built a multi-platform Nembon style mob farm over an ocean to the north of my my kind of spawn area. So now I have an easier supply of both bone meal and gunpowder, two things I was sorely lacking as a recently acquired elytra was just sitting in my ender chest, not being used very much because I didn't want to spend all my nights harvesting creepers for gunpowder. So now I have a mob farm, I can AFK it, and it's going a lot better.
I had a question about that because I watched that video as well. I noticed that you alternated the water on the platforms going up. So
yeah, one on, one off.
Yeah, as the clock goes, half of them are on and half of them are off, and then vice versa. Does that do a lot to up the production of the farm? Because ultimately, when I've tried stuff like that, something always ends up out of sync, and then my eye twitches because like there's two platforms in a row that are on. And, ultimately, it doesn't matter if the top 5 are on and the bottom 5 are off. It doesn't really matter. But it just, for the sake of like that nice aesthetic of having like every other one on and every other one off. Did you know if it matters if someone just decides I'm just going to have them all turn on at the same time?
I asked my community this because I wasn't certain myself. I wasn't sure if they encountered any tutorials where somebody had done the maths and like actually tried both versions against each other. Seeing as this is just one set of, I think, like 8 platforms total, it's not filling up the mob cap. And it wouldn't do that if all of the platforms were off versus all of the platforms being on. So I think alternating the platforms works better because when one set of platforms is flooded, the other 4 are still spawning stuff because the first spawn cycle hasn't filled up the entire mob cap, meaning that it's not reducing the efficiency of the farm to still have a bunch of mobs flowing out on the water and then dying in the campfires below. It's much more about constantly having mobs spawning in there and then flushing those platforms instead of spawning a bunch all at once and then letting the mob cap maybe reach saturation and then flushing them off and having to wait for the platforms to reset. And I think that gives it the edge. But with a farm this small, I'm not building sort of multiple modules of this, it's just the one. It really doesn't matter. The one where I had built 4 different, floating platforms, I think may have mattered more when I did like which platforms alternated and which ones didn't. But frankly, like it doesn't seem to make a difference if the farm you build is this small. Generally, people in the comments said, I've heard you're supposed to alternate them, but I've never really noticed a huge difference. And at the end of the day, the farms are efficient enough that the main factor is time. Every farm produces the same amount of things. The variable is going to be how long it takes to do that. So I'm fine AFKing for another half hour if it means I get another couple of stacks of gunpowder.
Right. If you're AFK, you're AFK. Like it's
exactly.
Yeah, I get it. Moving on into the news, quite a few things to punch out this week. Minecraft Java Edition 1.18.2 pre-release 2 came out between last episode and this episode. Technical changes in pre-release 2 include that they've added a spline density function, general purpose building block that allows you to express almost any function using a cubic spline. I hope you know what that means because I do not.
Same.
Fixed bugs in pre-release 2 include being unable to put focus on copyright Mojang AB, do not distribute using the tab key. Strongholds can generate in the void biome. Super flat worlds cannot be created without using presets. An empty generator setting string crashes the server when starting up. And fortress mobs can spawn outside of fortresses. Minecraft Java Edition 1.18.2 pre-release 3 was also put out. These are just bug fixes. A few to note are that glow berries and glow lichen generation does not cause light updates across chunk borders, being unable to double click to join a realm, the /locate command not working properly in flat worlds, the world freezes on superflat when using the locate command to find a pillager outpost, and explorer maps leading to a custom structure or custom structures can cause the server to hang. All of those bugs have been fixed.
Shortly thereafter, we had Java Edition 118.2 Release Candidate 1, the first and hopefully only release candidate for 118.2. This release candidate fixed 2 world generation bugs that could cause a server to stop running. Those were that custom dimension settings could cause the server to stop running but not crash, and some world gen data packs were killing the internal server, which was possibly related to density functions. The full release was planned for today, February 28th, and right as we started the show, somebody in our Discord was kind enough to link us to the full release article for Minecraft Java Edition 1.18.2. So to recap the main points of this update that are in the article on Minecraft.net, and you've heard us talk about these from previous snapshot changelogs, users running Minecraft in a 32-bit environment would receive a warning in the main menu about the upcoming end of 32-bit environment support. If you're a player in South Korea, gameplay timers and notices have been added in compliance with gaming laws to help remind players to take occasional breaks from gameplay. A seed of the number 0 is no longer handed as a special case during world generation. Any spaces before and after an inputted seed would now be trimmed. Dolphins will now more accurately pick the closest structure regardless of type when searching for drowned treasure chests, and ender chests are no longer gift wrapped around Christmas. There are also a bunch of bug fixes listed. We'll encourage you to check out our show notes this week or go to minecraft.net to find the changelog for yourself as we roll forward into 118.2. Over on Minecraft.net, we also wanted to highlight and give a shout out to friend of the show, Mythical Sausage. He was featured on Minecraft.net in an article talking about his love for building in hardcore survival Minecraft, medieval style building, and creating a kingdom on Empire's SMP. And as a pro for hardcore Minecraft, his advice was sleep. Sleep all the time. And frankly, I entirely agree.
I thought this was a great highlight for Mythical's amazing builds. When I always have a mental note to like, okay, I know I really like what he does. I have to try to not copy it when I'm doing my own medieval building, because my brain kind of goes like, yeah, this looks really cool. I've seen this before. Mythical Sausage.
Definitely want to shake your fist at. And he was always far and away the person to try and keep up with on Empire's SMP. Like, he was one of the people who just put us to shame in terms of how much he could get done. And he's a great dude. So again, shout out to Mythical Sausage. Well done for getting featured by the Minecraft team, and well deserved, I think.
We'll have a link to all of Mythical's online accounts and YouTube and Twitch and all that kind of stuff in our show notes.
Definitely. So 118.2 is out now, and I presume right after this I am going to be updating, because while I'm not in any hurry, I'm not an Optifine user. I don't rely on mods like Sodium or whatever to be updated. I'm not running Fabric on my single-player world. Changes under the hood are good. Bug fixes are appreciated. My experience of 118 and 118.1 has been pretty solid anyway, so I wouldn't mind if I had to wait to update to 118.2, but frankly, I think I may as well, right? I don't see much difference there. How about you? I presume the Citadel is going to be waiting a little bit.
Yes, we'll be waiting a little bit. Thankfully, Fabric is usually pretty quick to update, so we would be able to update to the Fabric API and the proper version of Fabric right away. But it's other mods that we are using. Now, sometimes they don't change any functionality. Sometimes the mod just has to change their version just so that they actually work. Same thing with data packs. It's just a matter of changing the meta file to make sure that it's on the right version. Otherwise, there's no change in the code. It works just fine. But because we don't see many things wrong with 118.1, we're not in a race, or we're not feeling like we're behind waiting for 118.2. There's no real content. It's just, like you said, bug fixes and stability stuff. And none of the server bugs that they've outlined and that we've talked about on the show today have been experienced on the Citadel. So I'm not really worried about it. We actually had a little bit more lag when we first started, but I think that might have been more of our hosting provider than the version of Minecraft. It seems to have balanced out a bit. Every once in a while, I'll get some block lag if I'm placing water really quickly, or digging out a lot of sand really fast. But that's been happening my entire gameplay career playing Minecraft. So that wasn't, that's not something that I think, I have to update to 118.2. That's going to fix it. The one thing that I saw was missing, that I notice an awful lot now, that I think is, we've talked about it on the show, but I've been experiencing a lot as I've been building and trying to showcase stuff live on stream. It rains a lot in Minecraft now. Yeah. And you can sleep. And honestly, I've actually been able to sleep when apparently the game calls it a thunderstorm, but I'm not hearing the thunder. Like if it's raining and I hear thunder, I think, oh, cool, I can go sleep and get rid of this weather and people can enjoy the stream a little bit more. But I've gone to bed or walked up to the bed around the end of the night. For me, I've got a clock on screen. So it's like it's 18:33 is when I can sleep. And I've walked up to it and clicked on it just habitually, thinking like, I know I've got a couple more seconds, but I want to just do this. And then it sleeps. And I realize it's because it's raining, even though it's not technically thundering for me, the game must realize that or think that it's a thunderstorm. So, because you can't just sleep through the rain. I wish you could.
Yeah, no, you can. I think rain always has to worsen into a thunderstorm. Like, I feel like thunderstorms don't just start themselves. So it may be that's just a coincidence of timing.
Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah, no, it's definitely got to the point where I've definitely... I'm quite happy that I've moved into a cave now because I was experiencing a lot of rain.
Right.
And having to wait potentially 10 minutes for the opportunity to sleep and get rid of the rain is kind of part of the gameplay for me now. So 118.2 is out. I feel like a lot of the changes in this are also for map makers, like a lot of the bug fixes and a lot of the stuff that we were talking about with Slice Lime last week with being able to have data-driven structure and feature placement in the game now, which is immensely powerful for people who want to tinker with that stuff. But then for the average survival player, I think 118 was a really solid experience for survival players primarily, and then 118.1 and .2 have been for everybody else, for the map makers out there, for the people who are tinkering with that stuff in creative, for builders who work in creative. All of that stuff is a lot more feasible now, and hopefully that puts us in good stead moving into 1.19, because of course the other thing for 1.18 to get excited about is the fact that they've said this is probably the last dot release for 1.18, and now they're going to start releasing snapshots for the wild update more regularly. We won't say there will be one next week because we don't know, but it's more likely that we'll start to see wild update content creeping out on the heels of the Warden snapshot that we got last week. So very exciting time to look ahead to stuff like the wild update.
Speaking of the wild update, that actually is a bit of a focus in our mailbag this week. What do you say we jump into some chunk mail?
Absolutely, yes. And if you'd like to email the show and give us your opinions on anything we discuss, really, but keep it short and sweet if you can, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. This first email comes in from The Stranger with the subject of Minecraft Immersion. Greetings, Jonny and Joel. I've been thinking about immersion in Minecraft since the announcement of 1.19. I use the dynamic surroundings mod to enhance the ambient side of Minecraft, especially the sound of footsteps, and the fresh animations resource pack to improve the look of mob movement. These two modifications make the game seem much more realistic to me. What do you think are the most noticeable ways in which Minecraft could be more immersive, and what features or bugs currently break the immersion for you? Thanks for a thought-provoking podcast. The Stranger forgot he was playing Minecraft because the game was so immersive. We will put links to dynamic surroundings and fresh animations in our show notes as well for anybody interested in checking those out. Those are both freely available on curseforge.com. I'm not certain if they're available for Fabric and or Forge, but I've played with dynamic surroundings in the past, so I'm a bit more familiar with that than I am the other one.
There's one called Mambience that I know works for Fabric, similar to dynamic surroundings. And if I recall, I think I ended up liking Mambience better. Mm-hmm. I do remember with Mambience that you had control over some things. So like if you didn't like the footsteps, which I felt were a little bit intrusive, you could turn them down or off. And I just turned them off. And I think I went with vanilla footsteps. But there were other things that I thought were great, like wind when you're flying with Elytra, and I think there were birds chirping in certain forest biomes and things like that. Squirrels, like not visually, just sounds. And I thought that was really cool. I don't think the fresh animations is something that I've tried yet because recently I switched to using sodium on Fabric to see if I can get better performance out of that rather than Optifine. And as far as I know, fresh animations relies on Optifine. I have not yet seen something similar for Fabric yet.
Yeah,
which
there's
is
a
too
lot
bad.
of stuff with resource packs that Optifine kind of builds upon the stuff that's in vanilla already. So yeah, it definitely says Optifine required like 3 points down that page. So fair play. I did just take a peek at the dynamic surroundings page on CurseForge. There is a dynamic surroundings fabric edition that is linked directly from there. So there's clearly a spin-off for fabric.
Cool.
On the subject of immersion, though, because that's the topic that the stranger is bringing up here, noticeable ways in which Minecraft could be more immersive. I entirely agree with stuff like dynamic surroundings. I think ambient sounds are fantastic for stuff like this. And having played with stuff like that, there's definitely a lot to be said for the ability to turn on and off some of those, because one of the things that annoyed me about dynamic surroundings was like a mosquito buzzing sound that happened when you were near water. And I went, no, I'm not having that. Like, and I think bees in vanilla Minecraft now have a much more pleasant buzz than the kind of tiny kind of sound that you get with mosquitoes. So stuff like that, and like, you know, running water having a variety of sounds. And I think variety is potentially one of the ways in which Minecraft becomes more like real life, in that we hear a lot of sounds and they can start to feel a little bit mechanical after a while. Minecraft does a good job of pitching different sounds up and down depending on, you know, a randomized kind of approach to that, which is why not all zombies growl the same. Sometimes you get some that growl a little bit deeper and lower, and there are a few different zombie growls, and that kind of variety could apply to a lot more things. So I think the water sound in Minecraft, as it kind of fades in and out, could maybe have like a couple more, you know, slops and sloshes, but it sort of mimics the way Minecraft's water moves in that it is very linear sounding. And obviously you don't get a great deal of natural movement in Minecraft's water because it's just a downward slope. So I feel like it almost makes sense. It might feel a little bit too realistic sounding in contrast to the minimal visuals in Minecraft. And so I think the ways in which Minecraft can be more immersive also have to match the aesthetic of the game, which is honestly a lot harder than it sounds, if you'll forgive the pun.
Yeah, I think sounds for me are the things that have added the most without the risk of changing the Minecraft charm. You know, when I walk through a forest and I hear birds chirping, I don't think, "Oh, this is different. Minecraft broken. Pickaxe down." Like, you know, it's not heavy enough for a big switch. I do find something that it can be good and bad depending on how it's implemented. It's talking about sounds, but things like cave echoes, like if you're in a cave and someone's put like a lot of reverb in the resource pack, it's different. So it's very distracting compared to what you're used to in Minecraft. And if it's overdone, if everything echoes like you're in a giant chamber, then it feels a little bit over the top, and then it's distracting, and then you can't think about anything else. But then again, like I've never played with that for like any length of time. I remember when I removed the Mambience mod pack that I was using, the first thing that I noticed missing was how quiet it was flying with Elytra compared to having the wind rush through your ears. And it wasn't like it was a bad thing. You just got used to it. But I noticed the change immediately. And so you do get used to it if you're playing with something for a very long time. I ran into some issues, I think, on my All of Fabric 5 playthrough with one of the mods. Forgive me, I don't remember which one it was. But as soon as I installed it and played with it for the afternoon, I felt the game was very laggy. So I'm not sure with sound resource packs how much of a tax they are on the system. And I know some of them don't have as many controls as others, but you can, if you know what you're doing, you can always go into the resource pack and just delete the sound. Like if you don't like the mosquito buzzing, if you can figure out which one it is and just like remove that file, then that's great.
From what I remember of dynamic surroundings, it was very configurable. Like there were opportunities to turn down certain sounds on volume sliders, disable them entirely, replace them. Like you could do a lot with it. And there were a couple of other mods on the same server that had similar things going on for what they would do with the surroundings, making things feel more natural. But I'm pretty sure dynamic surroundings was one you could configure pretty heavily.
Yeah, and I've done that with some of my own sounds. Like I've got a single resource pack, and the only thing it does is it removes the sound of grass breaking and replaces it with the sound of dirt breaking. Just because I particularly find that high-pitched grass static mining noise irritable. And I think I did it when I was flattening the area in the modern city where I was digging grass for days. And I was just like, okay, I'm done. I'm so done.
Yeah.
I was turning the block noises down, but then forgetting to turn them back up for when I was doing other things that, sounded weird. So yeah, that kind of stuff is always good to have control of. To move on to the other part of the question, which was like, what do you think are the most noticeable ways in which Minecraft could be more immersive, or what takes you out of the game? For me, the stuff that takes me out of the game are, I think, like wonky player controls and water mechanics. So lately, more so in my mind, because I've been doing a lot of work in the rivers, for which I have to take my elytra off. Otherwise, I'm just in a world of hurt constantly. And I'm not going to say that it's not entirely human error. Like, I'm sure that I'm probably auto pressing some button in my, just out of habit that's causing me to do all this stuff. But with the elytra on in water, you do this weird, floaty, annoying thing where you can't do anything. You can't place or interact with blocks until your feet hit the ground.
Yeah, you're kind of like bobbing up and down on the surface if you hold jump. Yeah.
Yeah, or vice versa. You dive in and then you're not in swim mode. You're still in elytra mode.
Yeah.
And it's convenient if you also want to then fly out of the water. But if you don't, I find it very disorienting, and it kind of makes me a little bit seasick. And so I find that kind of hard to deal with. And that takes me out of the game. Also, water mechanics doing funky things, like connecting in ways that they shouldn't, like when something flows up, which I think is one of the things they fixed in the recent update. But like one blocks of water, you pick up a bucket, and instead of creating a water source, you're just left with an empty square of water. Like that. You're like, oh, okay, right, video game, got it, okay. Because otherwise, I'm pretty good at kind of like that suspension of disbelief and kind of letting myself go into it. And this hasn't happened in a long time. But in terms of bugs, like any kind of chunk loading error, like when you're walking across a chunk and you're like, oh, I can see all the way down to bedrock because this hasn't loaded in. And now I can see like, oh, there's a cave spider down there. And like, that would have been nice to find naturally, but like I'm looking right at it. So that kind of stuff I always found breaking, but that's kind of the obvious stuff. Are there any features for you that take you out of the game?
It's funny because like, I was thinking about my answer to this and I thought it's weird, but I don't necessarily consider Minecraft immersive in the same way that other people do, in the sense of it being a more realistic experience because of how stylized the graphics are, and how I think about the game constantly is as a series of mechanics now. And yes, I'm building stuff and I'm trying to have an artistic vision for what's going on, but I either don't consider Minecraft immersive and that's not what I'm looking for in the game, or maybe on the flip side, I consider everything about Minecraft immersive despite its faults. Like, I know that I'm immersing myself in this game in particular as opposed to an experience that I'm expecting to imitate real life. I would probably, if I wanted something a bit more immersive, I would probably be playing either like something in VR that actually has a chance of simulating you being in that kind of environment, or something with more realistic both physics and appearances for everything. Ark Survival Evolved or Rust or any of those games that take a stylized approach but are a little bit closer to reality. I'm just used to looking at Minecraft as a game all the time now, and that's probably just because of the type of YouTube content I like to make. I've committed myself to explaining how Minecraft works as I go, and that kind of deconstructive way of looking at things kind of ruins the idea of immersion for me anyway. It just depends whether or not I'm kind of into it and focused on what I'm doing. I feel like tunnel vision isn't necessarily immersion. It's just like I'm really concentrating on what I'm doing. And I don't know if immersion is necessarily something that I want from the game, because I feel like that's also something it's up to the player to create. If you want to make an interesting looking swamp biome, then the game isn't always going to provide that for you. It's something that you can tailor to your own needs. You can make something feel more realistic by building it realistic. So as far as that kind of thing, I had a hard time coming up with any solid answers for that part of the question. How about you?
So I don't want to pilfer my answer to the next email with like the world building stuff, but yeah, I find that for me, features that take me out of it a little bit are things like the metric ton of river squid beaching themselves in the area.
Okay. Yeah, I can see
I mean,
that.
I understand. I like. I'm not saying that I don't want squids in rivers because, like, obviously mechanically that's a good thing in the game, and otherwise you'd be traveling forever to try to find ink. So like that kind of stuff is good. We talked about this actually a little bit on the Minecraft Hangout this weekend, but floating chunks of Earth.
Yeah,
In the sky, specifically like the 1 or 2 wide columns, not the big ones, but like I can kind of forgive the big ones in a fantasy kind of idea, but like the big floating islands and stuff like that, or floating chunks of land that just didn't render right, I think kind of take me out of it a bit. I think too that like just moving villagers around, like there's just something about dealing with villagers that I don't find overly immersive. Like I quickly change my mind to like, what is the most efficient way that I can game this system and get done what I need to get done, because it's just so frustrating to deal with them in any other way. Once they're in their place and you're trading with them, it's fine. It feels kind of immersive. It feels weird that they're imprisoned, but like that's what people do because it's the most, rather than chasing them around a town, which you can do if you prefer. It just seems to be the quickest way to the end result. And speaking of villagers, the wandering trader in my face constantly while building.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would be quite as irritated because I'm creating content, I'm trying to stream, and I'm trying to I'm looking at this block and talking about it, and then all of a sudden right in front of you, you're just like, dude, yeah. This is testing my patience. And so that kind of stuff, as far as features, because they're not bugs, that's exactly how the game is designed to work, and I understand why. But for me, I'm just kind of like, okay, I was really lost in what I was doing until like your nose poked up in my face. So that kind of stuff takes me out of it. As far as like the immersion stuff, or looking at Minecraft like a realistic world, for me, I think I'm wondering if it's like my background as an artist, specifically a cartoonist, and like wanting to do animation growing up and doing some CG animation in school. And for whatever reason, I can very much look at Minecraft like an immersive world like that. There's a quick suspension of disbelief. I'm not so into it that I feel like it looks realistic. And not like in the same, not nearly in the same way as when I added some mods to Skyrim on the Xbox and walked around in that was immersive. Like that was Walking Simulator 2.0. Like I was just like, okay, I really feel like I'm lost in this wintry hellscape. But I don't get that feeling from Minecraft, but I can kind of turn that switch and kind of forget that I don't want to say playing a video game, but I can certainly forget that it's the kind of game that it is, and treat it a little bit more like something else, which I think is the whole idea behind a sandbox game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also wonder if render distance has something to do with it sometimes as well, because if you think about other games which are visually more kind of, I don't want to say static, but you don't have as much control over the draw distance. The draw distance has basically been set for you by the people who made the game. Whereas in Minecraft, that's such a configurable aspect that I don't know if it feels as immersive, more immersive, less immersive to be able to see further in Minecraft. I find it almost off-putting when I play Bedrock Edition, and when I was playing Bedrock Edition with RTX, which, again, I think is probably one of the more immersive experiences I've had because of the way your player seems to react to the light when you step out of a cave and everything blooms for a second before it kind of settles in, your eyes kind of adjust to the light, or if you step into a house that you've built, you can see light streaming in through the windows, and that kind of feels more immersive. But on RTX, I had to have a lower render distance because it doesn't allow you to have as high a render distance as is possible on Windows 10 on Bedrock Edition, or Windows 11, I guess now. You can have the render distance up to, I think, 96 chunks with vanilla graphics, and I'm just like, I don't need to see that far. In real life, I don't think I could see that far unless, the atmosphere didn't exist. So it's kind of strange that you can see to that distance sometimes. And I find a render distance like I've got now of 16 chunks a lot more immersive just because of the fog blending stuff into the distance and there being, no visible horizon above those trees.
Next email comes in from the Snow Rose 77, a landscape artist member of our Discord. Minecraft lore. Hello, Jonny and Joel. I have been thinking about Minecraft lore a lot lately. The fact that there has been nothing too explicitly stated about the lore by the developers helps extend the game's quote-unquote sandboxiness beyond gameplay, allowing players to create their own. What sort of self-made lore do both of you keep in mind while playing? Do you like to imagine it for the whole game, for each world that you create, for each region that you build and play in? I like to think my player is like a botched Illager creation. Perhaps the evokers, in their plight to resurrect skeletons and zombies from an ancient builder race to pillage villagers, messed up the player's character's creation. They now explore ancient ruins and recreate builds that percolate through their memories of times gone past. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Snowrose77 ate a whole cake amidst an existential crisis. That's great. P.S. Thanks so much for the podcast. I've listened for a little over a year now. You're great company on the long work days, and I have finally joined the Patreon. Well, thanks very much for your support, and thanks for listening for so long. That's awesome.
Yeah, really appreciate it. As far as the lore of the game itself, I know there's been a lot of widely thrown around speculation from folks online about what stuff in Minecraft inherently means. And that's not what this question is about, as far as I can tell, because it's much less about widely held community theories and and much more about what you imagine for each individual time you're playing Minecraft. And I prefer that approach to imagining that Minecraft itself has a story, because we're never going to get to hear that story. The developers have been pretty clear that they don't want to. They have a lore of their own in mind for Minecraft, but they're not going to share it with anybody because that sort of defeats the point of what people do with the game. So I don't bother guessing why piglins zombify when they come through to the overworld, but villagers don't zombify unless they're bitten, and all zombies kind of look like the default Steve skin. And there's something going on there. Who cares, to me? And I don't have a problem enjoying that stuff when other people bring it up in videos or discussions. I just don't adopt it as my own way of thinking. When it comes to attaching lore to your own builds, to your own approach to playing the game, I think especially for building, I find it incredibly useful. And lore ties in with theme. So if you're building a base with a specific theme, it definitely helps both guide what you want to do next and to justify what you've already done. Not that anybody's really calling you out on having built another medieval house, but you think, yeah, people need places to live. And you start thinking a bit more about who those people are, and then that's what can, spiral outwards into lore for your entire world or just for that region. I typically do it kind of region by region myself, because a lot of the stuff I like to build is quite varied. So I'll build something modern somewhere and medieval somewhere else, and I'm not pretending that those exist in the same society. Like, they don't have contact with each other. It's not like one group of people just never got past a certain level of technology. It's much more about, I'm playing a video game and what style do I want to build in, and then the individual regions have maybe reasons why people have settled there, and it goes from there. But I'm much less thinking about it as an overall coherent world in the way I like to do things.
I have the same way of breaking it down. Because the Citadel is a long time server, we're not planning on resetting. And we wanted to have a little bit more of a cohesive feeling in certain areas, compared to what I know I've mentioned before is like the Minecraft style of the starting zone, where Maccast has a modern mansion on the hill. There's a treehouse not 20 meters from that, followed by an old fashioned cow farm. So that area kind of is its own thing. But as we've been branching out, we've done that thing where we've designated specific areas to have a design aesthetic. And to inform that, I like to think about three things: purpose, age or history, and visual experience. Age is the closest thing to lore that I lean on regularly. I don't have a story for the town of West Hill. I've loosely called it medieval fantasy just so I can explain to people very easily when they're coming into the chat what it's supposed to look like. And I use fantasy specifically because you'll have those people that come in and say, well, if it was medieval, then this would look like this, or you wouldn't have this. And it's like fantasy. Mm-hmm. It's my own. The internet can be quite literal sometimes. And for me, though, what is informing the build so much is the age, is thinking about different parts of the town being built before others. So you have the old part, you have the newer part, and then you have the newest part. And the newest part is going to have fancier houses. It's probably going to incorporate a lot of existing architecture from other parts of the town and then improve upon it. Whereas early buildings are probably going to look more run down. The roads are going to be different, that kind of stuff. And so that to me is the lore. I don't have a story. It's not a specific kind of people. I don't have like a magistrate that lives there, and like there's nothing like that. For me, purpose is something that really informs the individual builds. And it's lightly touching on lore. It's more like who built it and why did they build it?
Yeah.
And that could be something as wild and as fantastical as like the Nether hub on the server, or say something like a dwarven underground city or a floating alien base. Like you kind of want to have a premise. And that's, I think, what you were talking about when you say theme, same idea, is that you want it to have some sort of cohesive thing. With us on the Citadel, we have realms that are like 10, 20,000 blocks apart. And so what we've done is we've kind of assigned specific areas to be specific things, like an Asia Pacific kind of like Ming Dynasty area, where all those builds are going to look a similar way. The medieval fantasy, like, so you can build like an elven castle if you want to, just don't build a skyscraper, that kind of stuff. And that helps separate and help with the immersion that we were talking about before of being in that area. So everything within eye distance is going to be medieval-esque or fantasy-esque in style. You're not going to have like helicopters flying overhead, that kind of idea. But I find for me as a player, like in terms of the actual player's lore, I don't think of myself as like a player character. I think of me as me in the game. And I really feel the more I play, the more I treat Minecraft like a digital tabletop game or tabletop model. And I just imagine myself in that world, kind of like, for whatever reason, as like the ability, even though I'm playing survival, I still feel like I'm playing in creative in terms of like your godlike ability to create whatever you want. And I feel like the player is an extension of me in the same way that a brush in Photoshop is an extension of me when I'm trying to create. If I was painting a scene, that kind of idea is that I'm the artist. I can create this however I want. And that, I think, kind of folds over into the experience part of what I mentioned, the visual experience. And that is, I treat it like I'm not able to make a video game yet. That's not something that I can do professionally. Hats off to the people that do. But Minecraft gives you some really cool tools to almost do that. Like if you wanted to create, the experience of walking through those realms in World of Warcraft, start creating realms in Minecraft, start creating biomes, start creating those roads that round corners and a tree wipes in front of your view as it reveals a castle on the hill. Like you can have those moments. And that's what I think I'm doing with the lore or the immersion part of my city, is that I want it to feel not just that it is immersive, but I want it to feel intentional. Like I put this road here because yes, this is the most likely road that they would take going south, but also it's a really cool reveal when you come around the corner. Like there's a dual edge, and that's the artist in me that I can't turn off.
Yeah. If you want to see somebody else who's playing Minecraft like a tabletop game in a more literal sense, there's a guy I found on Twitch a while ago whose name is Acrylic51. He has a world that he's been working on for about 6 or so years, like 6+ years at this point. I think he's got some custom terrain generation in there. He's building a lot of it in survival by hand, but it's all tied into a set of fantasy novels that he's writing. And he also has a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that's running with some friends in the same world. So he's actually using Minecraft as both a canvas to visually describe some of the stuff that he's writing about in the books that he likes to write. He's using that then as a reference back when he wants to write more of the books. He has like a solid reference visually for what he can then write about. And also, yeah, he and some friends are effectively working their way through a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, which is a neat way of approaching this game, especially when Dungeons and Dragons happens on a grid, and so does Minecraft to an extent, and so you can kind of transpose some ideas between the two of them. But yeah, I think that's a really neat approach to it, and yeah, attaching lore to stuff allows you, as Joel was saying, to think about like who built this and why. Like if the answer is just I built it because I liked the idea, then fine. Like that's not a bad reason to build something. But if you want the whole thing to feel a lot more coherent, you can do worse than thinking, has this area been built by a civilization? Has it been built by aliens? Has it been built by, some sort of fantasy race? That helps you decide what your next move is, potentially even what materials you want to use, and you allow yourself to bend the rules of reality a little to fit the picture that you want, and that also means bending the rules of physics, which Minecraft does naturally anyway. As I'm building this dwarven mine, I'm thinking about, what are they there for? They're probably mining copper, because you get a ton of that in dripstone caves, and the dripstone itself doesn't seem all that valuable. So am I going to make a bunch of stuff in this area out of copper because that's what they're mining? Probably not, because if they're mining it, they're going to export it to use elsewhere in whatever civilization they come from. So I think it's, potentially they don't use a great deal of copper there. The materials there are more kind of wood and stone and probably some iron here and there, maybe a bit of deep slate, and you start to think what matches with those. So you end up with a bunch of different ideas coming out of just a simple concept of like who is responsible for this particular area being built. So I think that's fun. I think it's a good approach, and if you've got your own sort of idea that you're role-playing a character in the game, then that's also a fun way of doing it. What would my character do? There's plenty of ways to approach it, and all of them are correct, I think. It's a sandbox game, once again. You can sort of do what you want that way.
We do have a third email this week that we're going to fold into the main discussion. Do you want to kick us off with reading this one?
Yeah, so this one felt like a good thing to touch on, considering that we were talking to Slice Lime a lot last week and we didn't get time to fully flesh out what we thought about some of the stuff in the Warden Deep Dark snapshot, the experimental snapshot that was released recently. So this one comes in from Pine One Needle, and the subject is Pondering Portal Possibilities. Hi, Jonny and Joel. There has been a lot of speculation online recently about the structure at the center of ancient cities. Some suggest that it's a portal to a new dimension. Others propose that it leads to a pocket dimension, a small space unique to each player that only that player can build. Still others have conjectured that the portal links to a similar center structure at another ancient city, providing overworld fast travel across thousands of blocks. Regardless of what the structure actually does, assuming it will do anything at all, an interesting question is, how would the portal be activated? What if when the Warden re-entered the ground after not sensing a vibration for a while, it left a new item on the ground where it burrowed? This could be called Essence of Skulk, for example, and applying the item to the interior of the portal frame could activate it. What do you think? Would this encourage players to avoid the Warden instead of fighting it, so they could obtain the item, or is the idea flawed because it requires the player to summon the Warden in the first place? Pine One Needle stepped into the Warden's wardrobe, but ended up somewhere very different than Narnia.
Some really creative sign-offs this week.
Yes, very creative. And some creative ideas as well. I like the idea of the only thing that could activate this portal being from the thing you're trying to avoid the entire time. Although I will say I don't know if it's going to be possible to avoid the Warden if you're still looting the ancient city. Because having explored a bunch of this myself, and I presume a lot of the placement of things like skulk sensors and shriekers and catalysts and everything is sort of random when it generates these in the Deep Dark. I think there are some areas in which if you break a skulk shrieker, you're going to alert a bunch of sensors that will alert another shrieker. I think the only way to do it would be to break two of them in perfect unison somehow, and I don't think that's possible. So I get the feeling that when it comes to requiring the player to summon the Warden in the first place, that is really baked into the experience of raiding an ancient city in the Deep Dark. You are going to be encountering the Warden at some point if you want to get everything out of this structure. I don't know if players are going to find a configuration of an ancient city that's going to be favorable enough to the player that you won't see the Warden at all, and I sort of think that's the intended experience. So the Warden is going to be part of that no matter what, meaning that the Essence of Skulk idea does make a lot of sense as a concept, because you're going to encounter the Warden. Avoiding it is the idea once it arrives, and so if it leaves behind an item that is beneficial to the player, then that's, in theory, the intended purpose. And also doesn't mean you get the item by fighting the Warden. You get it from seeing the Warden but then seeing it leave again.
Yeah, and in this situation, beating the Warden means avoiding it successfully, not confronting it. After seeing your gameplay, I don't want to confront it. I
Yeah.
I don't think that's something that's on my to-do list. But I like the idea of it kind of like, especially because of how squishy and weird the skulk is, and the fact that the Warden looks like it has like skulk-ish features. I like the idea of, do you remember Slimer from Ghostbusters? Like whenever it went through the wall,
Yes.
it would leave like a swoosh of slime.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a cool idea when if the Warden is leaving you alone and saying goodbye, but as it exits the world, kind of like, I don't know if this is necessarily a physical digging itself out of the ground, or it's this is just how it arrives in your world sort of deal. And I like the idea of it, as it returns to wherever it comes from, it leaves like this little puddle behind it. And that could be kind of cool. Maybe it changes the blocks, into this essence that you have to collect. That could be cool too. I like the idea of it changing the blocks rather than it leaving like an item spinning on the ground that could despawn or burn or like otherwise be destroyed accidentally. I think that having to dig up a block that would then give you something would be cool. I like the idea of ancient frames leading to other ancient city frames, though I'm only going to get a little bit of ire from people saying like that's not exactly new game content. Like you just, it would be cool, but then like how useful is it once you've done it once, and is that going to be disappointing for a lot of people? We do get a fair amount of email regarding like end game content and wanting more of it. And in terms of like the personal pocket dimension, my cheeky answer is that that's going to be useful only on servers where you need to hide your goodies from other players.
Yeah. Yeah.
A simple solution would be play on a server with nicer people. Like I don't know. I mean, again, kind of devil's advocate there, but like I don't know how that would really play out in terms of its flexibility or usability for things. I mean, again, unless it's a combination of like, well, if that's what you keep in the dimension and you're somehow able to travel, then if you find another deep dark city and you need to get a bunch of things, like you've put 24 shulker boxes in your little pocket dimension and then you want to go collect them in another ancient city miles and miles and miles away, then that could work. But like that seems like a lot of bother. I'd rather just make 2 trips.
Yeah. No, like that was my response to that idea as well. Is like, it sounds cool on paper. It's the dimensional equivalent of an ender chest. And everything you build there is personal, but then that's not particularly valuable on single player where the entire world is already my personal dimension. Like it doesn't necessarily add value unless there is something unique about that environment which you can't get in the overworld, the nether, or the end. And if you want a pocket dimension that you can reach from a number of different places throughout the world, there are, in Java Edition, 128 strongholds that you can use the end for that if you wanted to, as long as you're happy not summoning the dragon again. You could use the central end island as a pocket dimension like that. So yeah, I'm very curious about this frame at the center of ancient cities. The most obvious answer, of course, is that it's a portal. But to where, or to what, and why are the follow-up questions to that. Now, it makes sense that it's a portal because we are used to portal frames in Minecraft being squares. Like a nether portal has to be a 2x3 or I think up to a 21x21 interior. End portals always look exactly the same. They're always a 3x3 made of specific blocks that you can't move or break. And that sort of lines up with the ancient city vibe as well. But then, if it's a portal, we don't know anything about a new dimension that they are considering adding. And if they're not adding a new dimension, then, if it takes us to somewhere in the overworld or the nether or the end, what's to stop us going there and finding it already? And so that's the interesting part, is if it's going to lead anywhere, it has to lead somewhere that feels new. And what is going to be new for the Minecraft team at any point is really kind of, anybody's guess at this stage. A new dimension was not announced for the Wild update. It certainly wasn't on the slate for Caves and Cliffs back when the Warden was just a feature of, effectively what's now a deep slate cave. So the fact that they have changed their vision for the Deep Dark to include ancient cities now include something that might also show a vision for something happening in future. And at this point, the developers might be laughing at us because they will have something completely different in mind for it that we don't know at all what it is yet. I think the one thing I appreciate in all of this is Mojang keeping secrets about this, because the Warden was one of those things that I wanted almost to be added to the game without anybody knowing it was there, so that people didn't immediately, go find it in creative or start decompiling the codes to find out what it did and where it lived before people got to discover it for themselves in a more organic way. And so this right now is a continuing mystery about the deep, dark, and ancient cities that's going to, have people's minds spinning a little bit and is going to be the next thing to discover after we've finally got our hands on the Warden itself,
Yeah, if they do decide to make it a portal into some other place, then I could see that not happening in the wild update. I think it would be an interesting idea to say, lay the groundwork for another update. Like if they've got future plans and they know what those plans are, but they know that it's not possible to do that all at once, a lesson they might have learned from 118 and 117, then I could see it being like, well, we know this is going to happen eventually, and we're also going to enjoy watching you all squirm for a few months while this big square box is hanging out in the middle of an ancient city. I do find the design of it kind of odd. Yes, it screams Minecraft Portal, but it also looks like a big screen TV to me.
Yeah,
which I can't unsee. And one thing I did notice that was interesting was that the blocks of reinforced deep slate can be moved by pistons, but cannot be picked up by the player. They end up being destroyed. We have a similar mechanic in amethyst geodes in that you can use pistons to harvest amethyst crystals, but you cannot move or collect or retrieve the budding amethyst. You can't collect all those buds, put them into a very tight, efficient farm, and run it yourself and get infinite crystals. Like you have to work yourself through a puzzle if you want to bother to automate a geode farm. Then there's a very specific way to do it, and there's immovable objects. There are things that you have to work around. There is no way around them. And I'm curious, the Pine Needle said there might be like something left behind by the Warden to initiate this potential portal. I'm wondering if to initiate the potential portal, you have to move it into a specific configuration. Like what if you have to change its shape? Like what if you have to turn it into a square? I think it should be a square to start with, but like, what if you had to turn that square into a circle or oval or, something that octagon, something that had like a specific, amount of movement. I'm thinking about the kind of work that people have to do when they want to break the bedrock ceiling in the nether, that kind of specific piston pushing things. I feel like doing something like that could be kind of interesting. Making you alter the environment to realign, whatever these things are to enter the portal.
Kind of like the scene in Stargate where they're trying to figure out what which symbols need to align to get to the right kind of like the right phone number that they're calling in the interstellar sense. They're like dialing the right thing for home. Shepard in our live chat has just pointed out they did say the blocks being movable was not intentional. So maybe that's not part of their vision right now. But for all we know, like presumably they have a plan for what this kind of thing is, but we don't know if that plan is set in stone yet, or if it's the kind of thing that through community speculation could then develop into something else. Like it was the kind of thing where yes, the Warden ended up getting delayed, but they added to the vision of the Warden. What if they've got ideas for this that they're going to delay until people end up coming up with more ideas for it? The other thing to point out about this location is that it always spawns with the same surroundings. It's got a walkway around the outside, lots of candles up against the kind of altar that this thing is built on, a lot of soul fire underneath, which is just on soul soil or soul sand. It's nothing out of the ordinary except, soul sand is usually just from the nether. There are redstone lamps lined up in front of it. So there are 4 redstone lamps on pillars with a skulk sensor waterlogged above them. So the skulk sensor itself doesn't make any sound. But if you make sound near the skulk sensor, it lights up the redstone lamp underneath it. And a few people kind of said, oh, what if you light up all of the redstone lamps? Does that activate the portal? Obviously, tried that, it doesn't. But whether that's part of it somehow, and if it's something as, I want to say, flimsy as that, because it seems like if you just light 4 redstone lamps within a radius of this thing, it turns on. there are so many ways for the player to manipulate that, and it doesn't really make for much of a puzzle, especially when these things are going to light up on their own when you go near them, and it's clearly not any kind of redstone mechanism that's going off of these redstone lamps and elsewhere, because there isn't enough room in the structure for them to be wired into anything else, or like an observer to detect that the lamp has turned on or anything like that. So yeah, I'm not certain if the redstone lamps are linked to it, or if they're really just there to provide a tutorial to the player to say, hey, skulk sensors can be waterlogged so they don't make noises, and they have a redstone signal that they output when they're activated. There's, some potential for that to be a red herring. There's also potential for it to maybe be part of the solution in the end.
That's an interesting idea, too. Activating other things in the area, specifically if to turn on the potential portal, if it was sound activated, then you'd have a choice to make.
Yeah.
like I want to turn this on, I'm going to have to make some noise. Is that going to then summon the warden? And then can I get through this portal before the warden realizes what I'm doing?
Go up there with a jukebox and a copy of Pig Step and see if that lights the portal. Yeah.
I can just, I'm imagining, like, my brain goes right to like Borderlands 3 Claptrap, like sitting in front of the portal going like,
yeah, immediately
dancing around, right?
Yeah.
That would be funny. One of the things that I think my brain goes to by default, and I'm trying to talk myself out of, is like, because of how dark and dank the deep dark is, the end is black space with floating islands and a deadly dragon. The nether is not inviting in the least. It's pretty dark and evil. My brain goes to more evil. Like, my brain goes to, like, probably because of the skulk, it goes to like, bioluminescence and like dark, twisted, weird stuff, kind of like Stranger Things, behind this potential portal. That could be the exact opposite. Like, it could be sunshine, rainbows, cotton candy, and brightly colored everything. The warden could be friendly and happy to see you and breakdancing on the other side of this portal, and just angry because he's in your world, not and away from cotton candy land. So who knows what it could be. But yeah, I find that it's really intriguing, especially because we've heard nothing about it, and I don't know what kind of thing is going to go. If they do something like that, if they do a dimension, if they do something like that, I'd like it to be wildly different. Mm-hmm. Like Minecraft, as much as we've been talking about immersion, Minecraft is weird, and I'd like like Sea Striders, weird, cute but weird, and I feel like you could go to the other side and have like put your foot down on the weird gas. Like, imagine like the experience of walking through one of those closet doors in Monsters Inc. Like that kind of weird.
Yeah.
I think that would be hilarious.
Yeah. Like, if we end up with a new dimension, it's going to be very interesting seeing what they do, because there have been so many other great ideas that have already been explored in popular community mods, like very well-known, almost household name Minecraft mods, one of which King B Dogs designed himself, the Ether. So, like, you've got stuff like Ether, Twilight Forest, Between Lands. They kind of run the spectrum, really, because Ether is more like a Sky Island sort of dimension. There's clouds and various bosses out there as well. But the experience, there are like pigs with wings and things like that. It's more angelic feeling. Twilight Forest is like a very unique dimension mod, and it's got its own share of like bosses and challenges, regions that you have to explore, unlocking them, kind of almost Metroidvania style, I guess. And then there's Between Lands, which is a bit more aligned with the deep dark idea. It's a lot more kind of like wild and untamed kind of vibe. But even stuff like that, the community's already explored concepts like that, which I don't know if Minecraft is going to step into the same territory, partly to avoid stepping on the toes of mod authors who've managed to get their work known so well, but also the idea that they have original ideas of their own that they want to push through. Custom dimensions in vanilla Minecraft are now way more accessible to the player, being data-driven, and the community can make their own dimensions using vanilla blocks and different world generation, and Mojang has even kind of folded that back in on itself with the Infinity snapshot that they released last April Fool's, maybe April Fool's before, I forget which. But that had a ton of different dimensions in it, a bunch of like Easter egg style things where it was rearrangements of different Minecraft blocks in different configurations, and it was really showcasing we can make dimensions data-driven, you can build a world out of more or less whatever you want. At this stage, you have to have a custom-coded way of getting there, but the fact is it's possible to do that. And so now they've done all of that, what can they still do that makes a new dimension impressively different from anything that a player could do at this stage? And that's the challenge that they've set for themselves if they're making this into anything dimensional. Like I said, I don't know if it's going to take us to somewhere in the Nether or the End that would be gated off from the player already. I think the only thing I can think of is if they did to the Nether what they've already done to the Overworld, and they put stuff below the bedrock or something. Like if they ended up building something below Y0 in the Nether and had the Deep Dark portal go to the Nether, like to the underside of the Nether. But then that's something that players could just break the bedrock and find for themselves with the right kind of technical approach anyway. So, yeah. Again, really curious about where some of this is going. I don't think it's going anywhere we've been before. And that seems like a perfect place for us to go to the end of the show. That's going to wrap up another episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chats, where you can participate in things like our live show recordings and the monthly Minecraft audio hangout. We're currently at 338 patrons, which is up an additional 7 from last week. Thank you all so much for hopping on board, and special thanks go to our content engineers, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, and Yitz, for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram. Personal recommendations are by far the best way to share the podcast. Just tell a friend about The Spawn Chunks and that they can listen to it on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you can find a podcast. While you're out there, leave us a rating and a review on your favorite platform. That helps us reach new listeners. You can also email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS link is on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the Render Distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by PixelRiffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where I tend to make sense of this bizarre and wonderful game in Season 2 of the Minecraft Survival Guide. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for the aforementioned YouTube series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at PixelRiffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I am doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio, is at joelduggan.com. You can link from there to the Citadel Cafe, my podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment, which is at thecitadelcafe.com. My server mate, Stephen ESC, is going to be joining me this week. We're going to be talking about Vikings Valhalla. You can follow me at Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I'm currently working my way through all of Fabric 5 and, of course, building medieval stuff on the Citadel.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, or so the stories say.